Hello friends, this is Growl. A lot of people are surprised to hear that I actually prefer doing my horrific vision solos as Resto instead of the other specs. The mobs have significantly less health when you're Resto, and I don't want to have to deal with having Azerite and setups for all the other specs, so I choose to do them as Resto. So in this video I'm going to go over how I do my 5 mask in Stormwind, and then hopefully next week I can do one for Orgrimmar as well. So the first thing to note is you want to prioritize very heavily for damage. My Azerite, I'm using all damage traits aside from one Grove Tending. I'm using a pretty low mastery build, and I'm using all damage or expedient corruption. It makes it go a lot faster and a lot easier. If you can kill the stuff before it kills you, then you won't have a problem. I'm running the Mock Claw, which you usually should be running anyway. And for essences, I have Crucible Major and just all essences that contribute to my damage. Another thing to note is you can always use consumables. I generally prefer to, although if I'm knocking out a bunch of them, sometimes I won't. But here I have scrolls and food and blast buff on. There's also special food that you can buy from the vision. You don't necessarily have to use that. Usually I'm just using regular food, so I don't have to take up inventory space. And with that, let's get started. So in this run, I'm going to be collecting all the chests and crystals as well, just because I still need sockets on some of my gear. I have a weak aura here that tracks them automatically. I will link that in the description of the video. So as a druid, it's nice that you can stealth buy mobs that you don't need. So I'm checking some of these chest spawns, and I can skip most of the stuff in the middle. But once you get to this point, you have to pull most of the stuff. In general, the guards outside of the main area of both Stormwind and Orgrimmar are pretty powerful, so you have to be careful. I didn't mention my talents. I'm also running Stonebark just for the reduced cooldown on Ironbark, since I'm not going to be pressing F-load that much, given that it's just me and I'm running around. One thing about visions is most of the mobs die fairly quickly, so it's almost never correct to be using your dots in cat form. You just want to be shredding, swiping, biting. You can use rake and rip sometimes on bosses, but generally you don't want to be using them on trash. Like this guy will just open up with rake and then bite, just because I know he's going to die within like 10 seconds. I probably should have used my claw at some point there too, but it's not super important. Another thing that's important to have in visions is Drainic living action potions. As a healer, you don't have an interrupt for stuns, and sometimes you may find yourself stunned, and you're able to use those while stunned to break out. Especially good for some of the mob casts, and I believe it's called Touch of the Damned or something like that. So I'm pulling a little big, but not too big. If you've ever watched a Demon Hunter or any DPS class pull this, they probably pull even bigger. You can pull bigger on a Holy Pally. It's a strange gift proc. So if you're not familiar with this buff, you get a buff called Gift of the Titans that gives you a huge haste and movement speed buff and doesn't let you lose sanity. In general, you want to try and play around this buff as much as you can, pulling lots of trash when you have it, and pulling a little bit smaller when you don't. Luckily for me, it just procs randomly in the middle of nothing, so I don't get to pull anything with it. So the first area is the Dwarven district. All of the trash is pretty easy here, so there's not too big of a limit with how big you pull. Usually I end up doing it in 2 pulls. This is one of the few guys where you can use your dots on because he lives pretty long. You have to be careful here. It's actually a little bit of a problem that you can get dazed. You have to be careful. You want to try and face the mobs when possible, just so you don't get slowed when you're moving around. If you get dazed, it becomes a lot harder to move out of the mechanics. It looks like it is Scorch Feet and Dark Delusions this week. As a druid, you don't have to worry too much about the affixes because you can shapeshift out of Leaden Foot, which is one of the most dangerous ones. The rest of them aren't too bad. So once we clear that stuff, we're just going to go click on all the bombs. There's a mount that drops from these mailboxes, if you don't have that one already. We'll just pull the rest of this stuff. It looks like there's a chest here, so we have to pull these two. One thing that's a good habit, honestly, I think the trash is the most difficult part of it, the visions as a healer. So while you're pulling these mobs, constantly just be pressing bark skin and iron bark on yourself, just to help reduce damage. Between stone bark and bark skin, you can keep a very high uptime on damage reduction on yourself. So there shouldn't be too much risk of dying. Now we'll click the rest of these. I wouldn't feel too inclined to be doing 5 masks if you're not quite comfortable with it yet. When I was just leveling up my cape initially, I would either do 4 masks or I would enlist the help of an ally or many allies if I needed to do my 1-5 mask of the week. Yes, I can solo a 5 mask, but my cape is also maxed and I have very strong gear, so it very likely won't be this easy if you are doing it under geared and you're leveling a new character. The mindset with all the bosses is that if you just pop your Mott Trinket and your Crucible charges, you can just kill it pretty quick. So now we're entering Old Town. This is where the trash starts to hurt. A lot of these invisible guys, these light hunters, do a lot of damage. So I try to pull this area a little bit slow and pre-hot whenever possible. Looks like it is split personalities, lead and foot, which is everybody's favorite combo. This mob has a circle thingy, so I try and backpedal to get out of it. So there's a frontal here and split personalities, so this guy you want to be very close to so that you can get behind like that. These informants are very dangerous. They have a cast that stuns you, so I'm going to put all my damage onto the informants. You see that I use my Crucible charge and my first couple builders on one, and then I use my 5 combo point bite on the other. You want to burst those guys down as fast as you can because you don't have a kick for them. You can use Typhoon in an emergency to stop the cast, but ideally you want to just burst them down with their low HP. So this area right here in this building has some stuff potentially in it. So my plan was to wait for a gift proc to go in, and I got one immediately. So we're going to go in even though we have mobs. This is a little dangerous, that's why I'm popping all my defensives. I used Bark Skin and Iron Bark there. We can use our Drainic Living Action Potion to get out of that stun. I didn't even realize that stun guy was pulled. That was not a pull I would generally recommend unless you're pretty geared, but this area can be quite difficult as a healer, this one specific room, so I usually choose to wait for a gift proc before I walk in. I just happened to get one while I was fighting mobs, so we attacked rapidly. But you saw there was a crystal and a chest in this room, so very often if you're trying to maximize your mementos, you want to be going in that room, even though it's quote-unquote optional. All this trash hurts really bad. Curse, I think, just does damage, so can dispel it if you're getting beat up. Always focusing down the informants in the pack, then usually the light hunters. So remember that all of your dots are affected by Gift of the Titans, the big haste buff. So right now you can see I have 183% haste, which makes any dot that I have very potent. Okay, so I got yoinked through that split personalities. Very cool. And it just immediately mash Ironbark out of it. I'm gonna get ready to Typhoon this guy because he's gonna cast. Okay, we got him. Getting DM'd in game, I apologize for that.
You take one monolith, I'll take the other.
Consumables make things a lot easier. Having Fort Scroll, Int Scroll, having your living action potions, health potions, all make this safer.
Now it's just us and Shaw. Let's finish this.
So we're short one crystal. We're gonna have to go back and look for it, unfortunately. Very cool. Split personalities. I think visions were a fun idea. However, some of the affixes can feel very, very abusive. Would have liked to see a little more love and care put into the affix system, but otherwise the idea was very good. These eyes you have to look away from. Remember that for whatever reason you can Sunfire and Moonfire without looking at a target, so that's generally my rotation when I'm too worried about looking towards that guy. Very cool. Split personalities. If you're ever in a corner, it'll just spawn and it'll never let you out. Okay, so we need to look for the last crystal. I'm double checking the other spots before I go into the last spot because there's some mobs over here as well. These guys can be a bit scary, especially because there's a very narrow area. So I'm actually just gonna like burst this and form it down while I'm far away. That way I don't have to worry about fighting them in that little choke point. But if you happen to have a gift proc or you're just feeling strong, you can just run in there. Just chaining between... Okay. Chaining between my Ironbark and Bark Skin just to keep DR up against all the trash pulls. So it might seem faster to go to the other entrance, but there are mobs that are stealthed by that other entrance, so I usually just go back the way I came. You can also use the portal as well if you have all the crystals and chests by the time you leave, but I never do, so... Can skip this guy. You don't even need wild charge, just with a well-placed jump. Back to safety. This is another one of the medium areas. This area is fairly easy. There's not a lot to worry about. This mental assault can do some damage. If you're getting hit by it and dropping to half and then you stand in some of the swirlies, it can be bad, but otherwise, if you're pulling reasonably, it's not too bad. These appendages burrow when you're not in melee range of them, so ideally you want to stand in melee as much as you can. I have a gift proc and a troll racial, so I'm just going to claw this guy and he's going to die instantly. I probably shouldn't have even ripped him. He's just going to die within 5 seconds. And taking care to look out for all the crystals and chests. Once you get enough sockets, or if you're not quite sure what you want to socket, it's not super important that you get all those, but it's handy. So I'm going to try and stay in melee range of these tentacles, but it can be a bit harder because there's lots of things going on, and scorched feet, so I get knocked back anyway. I'm just going to boss. None of the bosses in this area are too tough. I feel like Stormwind is overall... The mobs are a little bit harder, but there's not really any dangerous situations. So as long as you take Stormwind slow, I actually find it easier. there's not really any big risk areas. Somehow this guy is still alive. You cannot click these cages unless you're out of combat, so if you're ever stuck not being able to click them, you probably have a figment somewhere. I'm gonna check the last crystal spawn and pull the rest of the mobs. I actually find it pretty easy to solo as Resto. The main reason is that you can do almost your entire rotation while moving, so it almost plays like a melee DPS. You don't have to worry about having to stop to cast stuff other than healing, but you still have plenty of healing that you can use without having to stop and cast your Hots and your Swift Mend. There's not very many situations where you're caught having to spam regrowth, as long as you're using your barks proactively. So here's our last cage and our last chest. So here again, we can skip this tendril by just wild charging over. I believe you can go across the other side over there and jump over as well, but it's faster to wild charge there. So these tumors do a misleading amount of damage. You have to be pretty careful with just trying to walk through them. So usually I play this area quite slow, but it's split personalities, so I'm gonna stand in it now. This area can be a bit rough, so be careful not to pull too big in here because you have very little space. So I know there's a mini boss coming up, so I'm gonna try and save my combo points and my crucible charges. Okay, and this stuff just keeps spawning. Okay, very cool. Very cool. After all that, I use all my combo points. I'm just gonna orb here, just so I have stuff not constantly spawning on me. Remember, if you're still under geared and you're struggling with time, you can pull mobs into these orbs to kill them while not losing sanity. It's generally recommended. Yeah, I'm waiting for that split personalities to go before I pull this guy. You can see with all my combo points, my claw, troll racial, and my dots, the guy dies pretty quickly. What's especially nice is you don't even have to worry about DPSing. If at that point, once you have all your dots up, if you're worried about survival, if something gets pulled or you get hit by split personalities or something, you can just let your dots finish off the target and just focus on healing. These mobs are casters, so I usually like to go into stealth to pull them so I can rake this one and try and burst it down, so that I only have this one to worry about. The scream is a fear, so I typhoon it just as I run through the split personalities and get disoriented anyway. Alright, time to hunt for treasure. Cool. The chest here, so we're gonna have to clear this pack. Oops. Okay. Alright, perfect. Perfectly timed to gift proc. Oh, we already killed this guy, I forgot. Normally I don't kill him here. Normally I go straight into the mini boss. This debuff, I believe, increases the amount of shadow damage that you take, which is basically everything. So be sure to be dispelling this regularly if you're in combat with this guy for any amount of time. I'm going to check a crystal spawn here. Not right now, though. I'm going to stand here. Okay, now I'm going to check it. Alright, so the last mini boss, and we can go straight to the next two bosses. I believe the last crystal spawn is going to be over here, so we're going to have to clear this stuff. Okay. What's annoying is you can use bark skin while stunned, but you can't use it while disoriented, so... Oh. I tried to be fancy. Did not work. Alright, we have now all the areas cleared. Now we just go kill the bosses. This boss can be difficult for most classes. We're trying. Oh, we made it. We made it. This boss can be difficult for classes that can't remove the slow of Leaden Foot, but as a druid you can just shift to get rid of it, so it's not too bad. Once I get all my dots, we'll press our racial and throw our crucibles up. So while I'm running up here, I'm just spamming shifting from cat, out of cat. I get split personalities, so I gotta be patient. The polymorph doesn't affect you while you're in a shapeshift form, so make sure you're shifted for those. There's one on the last boss as well. And we're off. Don't forget to turn in your crystals. I've definitely done runs where I've collected all 10 crystals and then just didn't turn them in. Stormwind, I feel like, has more mobs than Orgrimmar. You get more mementos per run, it feels like, because I skipped as much as I could and I still have over 2,600 after turning in my chest. So I think it's probably preferable to do your runs on Stormwind now. But if you're struggling, some people say they found Orgrimmar easier. An orb, because why not? If you're struggling on time, you can look for a mob to pull outside to get a gift proc, because it only procs off of kills. I did not shapeshift the polymorph, and now I am a sheep. This fight is pretty straightforward. Ideally, you have your cheat death still available at this point, so you can not worry much and just do whatever. Although, if you're tight on time or if you don't have a cheat, you can use Bloodlust here, just to make it go a bit faster and be safer. You can kick these bombs as well to give yourself more room. since sometimes you can run out of room here. And that's it. That is a solo 5 mask as a Resto Druid. You can see it wasn't too tough. All the mobs have pretty low health. We're rewarded with our echoes and mementos. Actually, these gloves are very interesting. We'll use those in my verse set, which I will be playing on stream live this week. So remember to check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/yummytv. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you liked it and subscribe to my channel. I'll be making another video next week for Orgrimmar, as well as tons of content for both BFA and Shadowlands. Happy keying.